The red warning light blinked on the communication panel in Colony Administrator Zexthal's office. He looked up from his daily reports with tired eyes. Another problem. There was always another problem on this dusty mining world at the edge of nowhere. Zexthal was an Altarian, which meant he looked like a tall blue grasshopper with 4 arms and golden eyes. He had been running mining colonies for 30 years. He thought he had seen every kind of disaster that could happen on a remote world. Equipment failures, worker accidents, supply delays, solar storms, all part of the job, but this time was different. This time, people were going to die. The solar storm had hit 3 days ago. It was the biggest one anyone had seen in 50 years. The electromagnetic waves had fried half the colony's electronics. Most importantly, they had destroyed all 6 food production machines. These machines turned basic chemicals into food that could feed the 50,000 people living on Kepler-442b. Without the machines, the colony had enough food for exactly 14 days. After that, everyone would starve. Zexthal pressed the emergency button on his desk. The communication system hummed to life, connecting him to the Galactic Trade Federation's emergency network. A hologram appeared showing a bored-looking alien with purple skin and too many eyes. Federation Emergency Services. How can we help you today? The operator said in a flat voice. This is Colony Administrator Zexthal on Kepler-442b. We have a food emergency. Our production machines are broken. We need emergency food supplies for 50,000 people for 2 weeks while we get replacement parts. The operator typed something into his computer. Food emergency, got it. What's your colony population again? 50,000 people? Mostly humans and Altarians with some betazoids and other species. Okay, that's about 2 shipping containers worth of food. Standard emergency. Rations should work fine. We'll send the request to whoever is closest to your system. How long will it take? Zexthal asked. His golden eyes showed his worry. Standard cargo ship can reach you in 3 days. Maybe 4 if they have other stops. Don't worry, happens. All the time. We'll have you fed in no time. The hologram disappeared. Zexthal sat back in his chair and tried to feel better. 3 or 4 days. They could make their food last that long if everyone ate smaller meals. It would be tight, but they would survive. What Zexthal didn't know was that his emergency call had been forwarded to the human section of the Federation emergency network. The humans had their own way of handling emergencies. A very different way. Jake Morrison was drinking coffee in the Terrasol Emergency Command Center when the call came in. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had been handling emergency calls for 15 years. Unlike the purple alien operator, Jake read every emergency call very carefully. Food emergency on Kepler-442b, he said to his assistant. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park. Equipment failure due to solar storm. 50,000 people facing starvation in 2 weeks. Lisa looked up from her own computer. She was a small woman with short black hair and quick hands that never stopped moving. That's not good. Solar storms can cause all kinds of problems. What if their communication systems fail next? What if their power systems are damaged? What? If there are medical emergencies from the radiation? Jake nodded. This was why he liked working with Lisa. She thought the same way he did. When humans looked at an emergency, they didn't just see the immediate problem. They saw all the things that could go wrong next. Get me Admiral Taylor, Jake said. A few minutes later, Admiral Sam Taylor's face appeared on the main screen. Taylor was a big man with a beard and eyes that had seen too many disasters. He was aboard the USEV Liberty, the flagship of Emergency Response Fleet 7. What do we have, Jake? Taylor asked. Mining colony in the Kepler system. 50,000 people. Food. Production systems destroyed by solar storm. They're asking for basic food supplies. Taylor was quiet for a moment, thinking. Solar storm damage means their other systems might be failing too. Medical systems, power systems, communication systems. If they're that far out, they're probably alone and vulnerable. That's what I was thinking, sir. And if someone wanted to attack a weakened colony, right after a solar storm would be the perfect time, Taylor continued. No one would question why their communication systems weren't working. Lisa looked confused. Sir, there's no indication of hostile activity in that system. Taylor smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. Commander, in 30 years of emergency response, I've learned that the worst disasters always start with something small and innocent. A food shortage becomes a riot. A power failure becomes a medical emergency. An equipment malfunction becomes a colony-wide system failure, Jake understood. You want to deploy the full emergency response? I want to deploy everything we've got, Taylor said. When 50,000 people call us for help, we don't just give them what they asked for. We make sure they never have to ask for help again. Lisa was still confused, so they only asked for food supplies. 2 shipping containers worth. Taylor looked at her like she was a child who didn't understand something very important. Commander, when humans respond to an emergency, we don't just solve the immediate problem. We solve every problem that could possibly happen next. We don't deliver supplies. We deliver security, safety, and peace of mind. He turned back to Jake. Flag this as a code-red humanitarian crisis, full emergency deployment. I want medical teams, engineering teams, defense systems, supply ships, and construction equipment. If that colony is in trouble, I want to make sure they're never in trouble again. Sir, that's going to be expensive, Lisa said quietly. Taylor's eyes got hard. Commander, when someone calls us for help, cost is not a consideration. Results are the only thing that matters. Those people trusted us with their lives. We're not going to let them down. Jake was already typing orders into his computer. I'll alert Emergency Response Fleet 7 for immediate deployment. Good, Taylor said. And Jake, tell them to pack everything. If we're going to help these people, we're going to help them. Right. The screen went dark. Lisa stared at Jake with wide eyes. Are we really going to send an entire fleet to deliver food? Jake smiled. Lisa, you're new to human emergency response. Let me explain something to you. Other species send exactly what's requested. Humans send what's needed. And right now, that colony needs a lot more than food. Admiral Sam Taylor stood on the bridge of the USEV Liberty and watched his fleet prepare for launch. Through the massive windows, he could see dozens of ships moving into formation. This wasn't just a supply run. This was a full humanitarian deployment. The Liberty was huge, almost a kilometer long. It served as the command ship for Emergency Response Fleet 7, but it was small compared to the ship moving up beside it. The USEV Mercy was the size of a small city. It was a hospital ship that could treat 100,000 patients at the same time. It had operating rooms, medical labs, and enough medicine to handle any kind of emergency. Admiral, all ships report ready for deployment, said Commander Betty Hughes. She was his operations chief, a short woman with red hair and a voice that could cut through steel. She had been organizing emergency responses for 20 years. Taylor nodded. What's our total strength, Commander? 37 ships, sir, 6 heavy cruisers for defense, 12 destroyers for patrol and escort duties, 8 specialized emergency vessels including mobile factories, water purification ships, and habitat constructors, plus the Mercy and our supply ships. Taylor looked at the list on his screen. It was impressive even by human standards. They had enough firepower to fight a small war, enough medical supplies to handle a plague, and enough food to feed 1 million people for a year. Dr. Amanda Cross, medical status report, Taylor said into his communication device. Dr. Cross's voice came back immediately. She was aboard the Mercy, preparing her medical teams. Admiral, we have full surgical teams ready. Emergency care units are standing by. I've got specialists for every known alien species. We can handle everything from broken bones to unknown diseases. I've also brought a complete disease response laboratory in case there's contamination from the solar storm. Outstanding. Commander. Gary Stone, engineering report. Commander Stone was aboard one of the mobile factory ships. His voice was calm and professional. Sir, we have everything we need to rebuild that entire colony from scratch. Mobile factories are online and ready to manufacture replacement equipment. We can build new food production systems, repair their power grid, and construct emergency shelters for the entire population if needed. I've also brought enough spare parts to upgrade their systems beyond original specifications, Taylor smiled. This was why he loved working with humans. They didn't just fix problems. They made things better than they were before. Communications. Get me Ambassador Helen Price. A moment later, the ambassador's face appeared on the main screen. She was an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She had spent 40 years helping different species understand each other. Admiral, my diplomatic team is ready. I have cultural specialists for every species in that colony. We can help coordinate with the local population and make sure our aid is delivered in a way that respects their customs. How many specialists are we taking? 500, sir. Plus interpreters, cultural advisors, and administrative support staff. Commander Betty looked surprised. Ma'am, that's more people than most species send for entire military operations, Ambassador Price smiled. Commander, when humans help someone, we don't just drop off supplies and leave. We make sure the people we're helping understand what we're doing and why. We make sure they're comfortable with our presence. We make sure they know how to use everything we're giving them. That takes people who understand both human and alien cultures. Communications Officer Ryan Bell looked up from his station. He was a young man with nervous energy and fast fingers. Admiral, I'm getting confused transmissions from Federation monitoring stations. They're asking if there's been a military escalation in the Kepler system. Some of them think we're preparing for an invasion. Taylor sighed. This happened every time humans deployed an emergency response fleet. Other species looked at their ships and saw a military force. They didn't understand that humans approached emergencies like military operations because emergencies were serious business. Send them our mission parameters, Ryan. Make it clear this is a humanitarian operation. Yes, sir. Should I explain why we need so many ships? Tell them the truth. We're prepared for any contingency. Medical emergency, infrastructure failure, hostile action, natural disaster, population evacuation. We don't know what we're going to find when we get there, so we're ready for everything. A few hours later, the confusion had spread to the highest levels of the Federation government. On Centauri Prime, the Federation Emergency Council was meeting an emergency session. The council chamber was full of aliens from dozens of different species, all trying to understand what the humans were doing. The Altarian representative, Kexter, was the first to speak. He looked exactly like Colony Administrator Zexthel, but older and more worried. The humans have deployed a battle fleet to deliver food supplies. This is unprecedented. Are they planning to invade the Kepler system? The human representative, Ambassador Kate Johnson, stood up slowly. She was a calm woman with gray hair and patient eyes. She had been explaining human behavior to aliens for 30 years. Council members, Emergency Response Fleet 7 is conducting a standard humanitarian operation. The colony requested food supplies. We are providing food supplies along with medical support, infrastructure repair, and defensive capability. The vegan delegate made a sound like an angry bird. His species were strict pacifists who believed violence was never necessary. Defensive capability? The colony is not under attack. There is no military threat in that system. Why do you need weapons? Ambassador Johnson looked at him with the expression she used when explaining simple things to confused children. Delegate, when humans respond to an emergency, we prepare for unknown threats. That's why they're called unknown. We don't know what might happen, so we prepare for anything that could happen. The crystalline delegate from Silicate 7 flashed different colors as it spoke. Ambassador Johnson, your species has deployed more ships for this supply run than our entire military possesses. This response seems excessive. Does it? Johnson asked, let me ask you this. If your homeworld called for emergency food supplies, how many of your people would you want us to save? All of them, of course. Then you understand our response. We are prepared to save all of them. From starvation, from disease, from equipment failure, from natural disasters, from hostile action, from any threat that might arise, we don't do partial solutions. We do complete solutions." The dolphin representative whistled in confusion. "But the cost of such an operation must be enormous," Johnson smiled. "Council members, let me tell you something about humans. We don't calculate the cost of saving lives. We calculate the cost of losing them, and that cost is always too high." The room fell silent. Finally, the council chairman, an ancient turtle-like being from Slow World, spoke in his deep, slow voice. "Ambassador Johnson, are you saying that this massive response is normal for human emergency operations?" "Yes, Chairman. We maintain 47 emergency response fleets throughout human space. Each one is capable of this level of response. Each one is ready to deploy at a moment's notice. Because when someone calls us for help, we don't ask how much help they need. We ask how much help we can give." Back in the Kepler system, Emergency Response Fleet 7 was preparing to jump to hyperspace. Admiral Taylor stood on his bridge, looking at the stars ahead. Somewhere out there, 50,000 people were waiting for help. They thought they were getting food supplies. They were about to get much more than that. "All ships report ready for hyperspace." "Jump," Commander Betty announced. "Take us out," Taylor ordered. The stars stretched into lines of light, and Emergency Response Fleet 7 disappeared into hyperspace, carrying enough firepower to conquer a system and enough compassion to save a world. Colony Administrator Zexthal was in his office reviewing food rationing schedules when every alarm in the colony started screaming at once. The sound was so loud it hurt his ears. He had never heard the invasion alarm before, but he knew what it meant. Something very big and very dangerous was approaching their world. His communication officer, a young Batasoid named Relmos, burst through the door. His face was pale and his hands were shaking. "Administrator, you need to see this. The sensors are going crazy." Zexthal followed him to the control room. The main screen showed space around their planet. Usually it was empty except for the occasional cargo ship or mining transport. Now it was full of ships, huge ships. "Military ships? How many?" Zexthal asked, his voice barely a whisper. 37 vessels, sir. We're reading multiple heavy cruiser configurations, unknown vessel types, and one ship that's the size of a small moon." Zexthal felt his four hearts stop beating. This was an invasion. It had to be. Nobody sent 37 ships for a peaceful visit. He reached for the emergency button that would send a distress call to the Federation military before he could press it. The largest ship on the screen started transmitting. A human face appeared on their communication system. The man had a gray beard and calm eyes, but Zexthal was too terrified to notice. "Colony Administrator Zexthal, this is Admiral Sam Taylor of the United Systems Emergency Response Fleet 7. We are here in response to your supply request. Request permission to begin humanitarian operations." Zexthal stared at the screen for a long moment. His translator was having trouble with some of the words. "Humanitarian operations?" "Admiral, we requested food supplies. Basic emergency rations. For 2 weeks." Admiral Taylor nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Understood, Administrator? We are prepared to provide 5 years' worth of emergency food supplies, complete medical screening for your entire population, infrastructure repair and upgrades, and defensive perimeter establishment. We have also brought cultural specialists to help coordinate with your population's dietary and social requirements. 5 years?" Zexthal's voice went up so high it squeaked. "Admiral, we only need 2 weeks of food. Just until we can get replacement parts for our machines." "Administrator, we've brought replacement parts for every system in your colony, plus upgrades and backups. We don't want you to have this problem again." Before Zexthal could answer, the first human shuttle was already landing in the colony's main plaza. It wasn't carrying just food. It was carrying a complete mobile command center with 30 specialists. They set it up in less than an hour. Dr. Amanda Cross was the first human to meet Zexthal face to face. She was a small woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. She carried a medical scanner and a friendly smile. "Administrator, I'm Dr. Cross. I'd like to begin health screenings for your population. The solar storm might have exposed people to harmful radiation. We want to make sure everyone is healthy." But nobody is sick, Zexthel protested. That's wonderful, Dr. Cross said. But we like to be sure. Prevention is much easier than treatment. Don't worry, our medical teams can screen your entire population in about 6 hours. While Dr. Cross was talking, Commander Gary Stone and his engineering teams were already working on the broken food machines. Zexthel watched in amazement as they didn't just repair the machines. They completely rebuilt them with better parts and added backup systems. These new machines can produce food for 200,000 people, Commander Stone explained to the colony's chief engineer, a Betazoid named Telver. Even if you have another solar storm, the backup systems will keep working. We've also upgraded your power grid and installed secondary generators. Telver looked confused, but we only have 50,000 people. Right now you do, Stone said cheerfully, but colonies grow. Better to be ready for growth than surprised by it. By the end of the first day, the colony had been completely transformed. The humans had set up medical stations, repair workshops, and supply depots. They had improved the mining equipment, upgraded the communication systems, and installed defensive sensors around the planet. Zexthel found Admiral Taylor in the mobile command center that evening. The Admiral was reading reports from his teams and looked completely relaxed, as if transforming entire colonies was something he did every day. Admiral Taylor, I must speak with you about something that confuses me. Taylor looked up from his reports. Of course, Administrator. What can I help you with? Your response to our emergency call seems extremely Darrow. We asked for food supplies. You brought enough supplies to last us for years. You brought medical teams even though nobody is sick. You brought engineers even though we only needed food machines repaired. You brought defensive systems even though we're not under attack. Taylor nodded. That's correct, but why? The cost must be enormous. The effort must be incredible. Why do you do so much when we ask for so little? Taylor was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain something that seemed obvious to him. Administrator, when someone calls for help, they're trusting us with their lives. If we just give you enough food for 2 weeks and leave, what happens if your machines break again? What happens if someone gets hurt and needs medical care? What happens if hostile forces move into this area while you're still vulnerable? The chances of those things happening are small. Maybe, Taylor agreed. But the consequences of those things happening are huge. We don't just want to help you survive your current crisis. We want to make sure you can thrive no matter. What happens next? Zexthel was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, Is this normal for humans? This level of response to emergency calls? Taylor smiled. Administrator, this is actually a fairly small operation for us. We have 47 emergency response fleets. Each one is ready to deploy for humanitarian operations. Some of them are much larger than this one. Much larger? Emergency Response Fleet 12 includes mobile shipyards and planetary construction equipment. We could build you an entire new city if you needed one. Zexthel felt dizzy. Why do you maintain so many fleets for helping people? Because helping people is what humans do, Taylor said simply. It's not a burden for us. It's not a duty we have to perform. It's who we are. When someone needs help, we help them. Not just enough to get by, but enough to make their lives better. That night, Zexthel walked through his colony and saw things he had never seen before. People were smiling. Children were playing instead of worrying about food. The miners were excited about the new equipment that would make their jobs safer and easier. For the first time since the solar storm, Zexthel wasn't worried about the future. The humans hadn't just solved his problems. They had made those problems impossible to happen again. News of the human response spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On every world, in every space station, aliens were talking about the same thing. The humans had sent 37 ships to deliver food to one small colony. On the water world of Aquatica Prime, the Dolphin Congress was meeting in their underwater city. Committee Chair Swift Current Running swam in tight circles, which was how dolphins showed confusion. Her aide Deep Swimming Thoughtful floated beside her, clicking nervously. The humans sent what to deliver food? Swift current running whistled. 37. Ship's chair, including a hospital ship the size of a city, 6 battle cruisers, and enough supplies to feed the colony for 5 years. Swift current running stopped swimming. When the coral farmers on the southern reef called for emergency food last year, we sent them 1 cargo pod. It had exactly what they asked for and nothing more. That's normal procedure for emergencies, Deep Swimming Thoughtful agreed. But the humans didn't follow normal procedure. They sent a fleet that could conquer a small star system just to help. 1 colony, why would they do that? Neither dolphin had an answer. On the crystal world of Silicate 7, the living crystal beings were having the same conversation. Thousand-faceted reflection was the emergency response coordinator for the entire planet. Its crystal body flashed different colors as it processed the information about the human response. The humans included medical facilities capable of treating every person in the colony at the same time, it said to its assistant, sharp-edged clarity. They brought defensive systems that could protect the colony from a full military attack. They brought enough construction equipment to rebuild the entire settlement. Sharp-edged clarity flashed orange, which meant confusion. But the colony only asked for food? Why did the humans bring all those other things? Unknown. The human mind works in ways we do not understand. They seem to prepare for problems that do not exist. Perhaps they are paranoid? Thousand-faceted reflection considered. Blissa. Or perhaps they are simply more careful than we are. The most shocked reaction came from the Carnivore Alliance. These were warrior species who believed strength was the most important thing in the universe. General Razorclaw of the Feline. Dominion was aboard his battlecruiser Predator's Edge, studying reports with his intelligence officer Colonel Sharpfang. They deployed a battle group for a humanitarian mission. Razorclaw growled, his claws extending and retracting as he thought. Their emergency response fleet carries more firepower than our last 3 military operations combined. Colonel. Sharpfang's tail twitched nervously. General, our intelligence sources say this is normal for human emergency response. They maintain these fleets throughout their space, ready for immediate deployment. How many fleets do they have? 47. Active emergency response fleets, sir. Razorclaw's ears flattened against his head. The entire Carnivore Alliance only had 12 military fleets for conquest and defense. The humans had 47 fleets just for helping people. Colonel, are you telling me that the humans have 4 times as many ships dedicated to saving lives as we have dedicated to taking them? Yes, sir. And their emergency fleets are larger and better equipped than our military fleets. Razorclaw was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, what kind of species builds an entire military just to help strangers? I don't know, sir. But I'm beginning to think we should be very careful about making enemies of the humans. On the peaceful world of Garden Prime, the Pacifist Collective was having an emergency meeting. They were a species that had given up all weapons and violence thousands of years ago. They believed that all problems could be solved through talking. And understanding. Their leader, gentle voice speaking, was reading the reports about the human response with growing amazement. The humans brought enough medical supplies to handle any disease or injury that might occur. They brought engineers who could rebuild the colony's entire infrastructure. They brought cultural specialists who could communicate with every species. In the colony, her assistant, soft words flowing, made a sound like wind through leaves. Leader, the humans seemed to have anticipated every possible problem that could happen to the colony, even problems that were very unlikely. Yes, they prepared not just for the emergency that actually happened, but for every emergency that might happen. But why? It must have cost them enormous amounts of money and resources. Gentle voice speaking was quiet for a moment. Perhaps because they understand something we do not. Perhaps they know that the cost of preventing suffering is always less than the cost of dealing with suffering after it happens. The confusion reached its peak at the Federation Emergency Council on Centauri Prime. Representatives from hundreds of species had gathered to discuss the human response. The council chamber was full of angry voices, confused questions, and worried whispers. Ambassador Kate Johnson sat calmly at the human delegation's table while aliens argued around her. She had been through this before. Every time humans helped someone, the rest of the galaxy got confused and upset. The ethereal representative, a floating energy being named Luminous Thought Ascending, spoke first. Ambassador Johnson, your species. Response appears to assume that every emergency call is a potential military situation. Is this based on some historical experience we should know about? Johnson stood up slowly. She was used to explaining human behavior to confused aliens. Representative. During our expansion into space, we learned that small problems can quickly become big disasters. A food shortage can mean someone is sabotaging the colony. Equipment failure can mean hostile action. We prepare for the worst-case scenario because we've seen what happens when you don't. The vegan delegate made his angry bird sound. But surely, your response to this mining colony was excessive. They only needed food. Was it excessive? Johnson asked. Every person in that colony now has medical care, upgraded living conditions, and infrastructure that can support them for years. If there had been a medical emergency, they could have been treated. If there had been infrastructure failure, they could have been evacuated. If there had been hostile action, they could have been defended. We didn't just solve their immediate problem, we eliminated their vulnerability. The crystalline delegate flashed red with frustration. But the cost, Ambassador. The resources you spent on this one colony could have helped dozens of other worlds. Johnson smiled. Could it? How do you help someone halfway? How do you give them just enough medicine to survive, but not enough to be healthy? How do you give them just enough food to not starve, but not enough to thrive? How do you protect them just enough to survive today, but not enough to be safe tomorrow? The chamber fell silent. Johnson continued, when humans help someone, we don't calculate the minimum we can do. We calculate the maximum we can do. Because when someone calls for help, they deserve our best effort, not our cheapest effort. The dolphin representative whistled softly. Ambassador, are you saying that every emergency response from humans includes this level of support? Yes, every single one. Because every person who calls for help deserves to have their life improved, not just their immediate crisis solved. The ancient chairman from Slow World spoke in his deep, slow voice. Ambassador Johnson, your species spends more resources on helping strangers than most species spend on helping themselves. Why? Johnson looked around the chamber at all the confused alien faces. Chairman, let me ask you a question. If your child was in danger, how much would you spend to save them? Everything I had? Then you understand humans perfectly? When someone calls us for help, we treat them like family. And you don't do half measures for family. The chamber was completely silent now. Finally, one of the younger delegates asked, quietly, how many species think like humans do? Johnson looked sad for a moment. Not nearly enough. 3 months had passed since emergency response fleet 7 arrived at Kepler 442b. The mining colony had been completely transformed. Where once there had been basic shelters and simple equipment, now there was a thriving community with advanced technology and happy people. Colony Administrator Zexthal stood in his new command center, watching human technicians teach local engineers how to operate the upgraded systems. The room was twice as large as his old office and filled with equipment he had never dreamed of having on a remote mining world. Dr. Amanda Cross had established a permanent medical station in the colony. It was staffed by volunteers from the colony who had been trained in human medical techniques. The station could handle any medical emergency and had already saved 17 lives from conditions that would have been fatal before the humans arrived. The food production facilities now created more food than the colony could eat. The surplus was being traded with other colonies in nearby systems, bringing in money that was used to improve life for everyone. The mining operation was running at 3 times its previous efficiency thanks to new equipment and better safety systems. Most importantly, nobody was afraid anymore. The solar storms that had once terrified the colonists were now just minor inconveniences. The backup systems the humans had installed could handle anything nature could throw at them. Zexthal walked to his window and looked out at the colony plaza. Children were playing games they had learned from human cultural specialists. Adults were attending classes on new technologies. Everyone looked healthy and happy and secure. A soft chime told him that Admiral Taylor wanted to speak with him. The Admiral's face appeared on the communication screen. He was aboard the Liberty, preparing for the fleet's departure. Only a small support team would remain behind to help with any problems that might arise. "Administrator Zexthal, I wanted to speak with you before we leave," Taylor said. "Of course, Admiral. Please come to my office." An hour later, Admiral Taylor was sitting across from Zexthal in the comfortable chairs that had been part of the office upgrade. The Admiral looked relaxed and satisfied, like someone who had completed an important job. "Admiral, I must ask you something that has puzzled me for months," Zexthal said. "Go ahead." "When you humans help someone, you don't just solve their immediate problem. You make it impossible for them to ever have that problem again. You give them tools and knowledge and resources they never asked for. You spend enormous amounts of time and money on strangers. Why do you do this?" Taylor was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain something that seemed natural to him but strange to others. "Administrator, when someone calls for help, they're trusting us with something very precious. Their lives, their families, their future. That's not a small responsibility. But you could have just sent us food and left. We would have been grateful." "Yes, you would have been grateful. But what would have happened when your food machines broke down again? What would have happened if someone got seriously injured and needed medical care you couldn't provide? What would have happened if hostile forces moved into this area while you were still vulnerable?" Zexthal nodded slowly. "You would have had to come back and help us again. Maybe we would have been too late. Maybe people would have died while we were traveling here. Maybe the problems would have grown too big for us to solve." Taylor leaned forward in his chair. "Administrator, we learned a long time ago that the best way to help someone is to make sure they never need help with that problem again. It costs more at the beginning, but it saves lives in the long run. But the expense is always worth it," Taylor finished. "Administrator, what's the value of a life? What's the value of a child who gets to grow up healthy because we built a medical station? What's the value of a family that never has to worry about starving because we upgraded their food systems? What's the value of a community that can defend itself because we taught them how?" Zexthal was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, "Is this normal for humans? This level of care for strangers?" Taylor smiled. "It's not just normal, Administrator, it's who we are. Helping people isn't something we do because we have to. It's something we do because we want to. When someone needs help, we don't ask how little we can do, we ask how much we can do. And other species don't think this way. Some do, but not many. Most species help others just enough to solve the immediate problem. They give exactly what's asked for and nothing more. They don't think about what might happen next." Zexthal shook his head in amazement. "Admiral, do you realize what you've done here? You haven't just saved our colony. You've made us part of something bigger. We're connected to human space now. We're part of your community." Taylor's smile grew wider. "That's the point, Administrator. When humans help someone, we don't create dependence. We create partnership. We don't want you to need us. We want you to be strong enough to help others the way we helped you." As Emergency Response Fleet 7 prepared to leave the Kepler system, word of their success had spread throughout the galaxy. Emergency calls to human space had increased by 400% in the past month. Not because there were more emergencies, but because other species had learned that when humans responded to a call for help, entire civilizations could be transformed. The Galactic Trade Federation had established something called the Human Protocol for Emergency Response. Most species couldn't match the scope of human operations, but they were trying to do more than just solve immediate problems. They were starting to think about long-term solutions. It had become a joke among space traders that if you needed supplies delivered, you called any species. But if you wanted to never need supplies again, you called the humans, Admiral Taylor. stood on the bridge of the Liberty, watching the stars as his fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace. Communications Officer Ryan Bell looked up from his station with a familiar expression. "Admiral, we're receiving another emergency call." "Agricultural. World called Demeter 7. They're having crop failures. Population of 2.3 million people. They're requesting grain shipments to last 6 months while they solve their farming problems." Taylor smiled the same smile he had worn 3 months ago when they first heard about Kepler 442b. "How far away are they, Ryan?" 4 days at maximum. "Speed, sir." "Alert Emergency Response Fleet 15 for immediate deployment. Full humanitarian response." "Sir, they're only asking for grain shipments." Taylor looked at him with the patient expression he used when explaining obvious things. "Ryan, when humans respond to an emergency, we don't deliver supplies, we deliver hope. We deliver security. We deliver a future where people don't have to be afraid." "Yes, sir. Should I tell them we're coming?" "Tell them the truth. Tell them that help is on the way. And tell them that when we're finished, they'll never have to worry about crop failures again." In the depths of space, 38 ships changed course toward Demeter 7. They carried enough supplies to feed a world for decades. Enough medical equipment to handle any health crisis, enough engineering expertise to revolutionize an entire agricultural system, and enough defensive capability to protect millions of people from any threat. But most importantly, they carried the human belief that when someone asks for help, you don't just give them what they need to survive. You give them what they need to thrive, because that's what humans do. That's who humans are. And that's why, in a galaxy full of species who help others just enough to get by, humans help others enough to change their entire world. The stars stretched into lines of light as Emergency Response Fleet 7 jumped to hyperspace. Heading home to Terra Sol. Behind them, the Kepler colony continued to grow and prosper, a testament to the human belief that helping someone once should mean helping them forever.